I'd like to call to order tonight's EDC meeting.
All right, roll call. Alicia Neff.
Here.
Carol Noker is absent with prior notice. Kelly Maxfield. Here. Oh. Kelly, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, sorry, we had some feedback with the YouTube channel, so I think we're all
Okay.
fixed.
Okay.
All right, Kelly Kupelski.
Here.
Steve Langley is absent with prior notice. Bruce Kramer.
Here.
Jason Hoyt.
Here.
Tara Young is absent with prior notice. And we have Carrick Brown with us as well.
Here.
All right, everyone. Number 2 is new member introduction. Tonight we have Carrick Brown with us. This is his first meeting with us. He's also listened to previous meetings of ours as well. So he seems up to speed on some things. And so we're happy to have him. Do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, my name's Carrick Brown. Lived in Smithville now for 3 years, originally from Liberty area. I'm a agent with Reese Nichols, North Kansas City. Excited to learn and be a part of this and help out any way I can.
Great. Happy to have you.
All right, now we need to approve the minutes from our October 26th executive session. So we need a motion
So moved.
and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Now approval of minutes from the October 26th regular meeting. Need a motion.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Reports. Do we have anything from the chamber?
Nothing from the chamber or the school that came through prior to.
Okay. Chairwoman's report. Just pretty much any new developments, I guess, that you've seen around town, the pieces that Anna will report on as far as actual numbers and developments. From Main Street, we had Wine Walk, which was extremely successful. And I think we had well over 300 tickets sold, plus participants, vendors. We had over 40 vendors that sold on the square. All of the businesses were extremely happy. Most of them said it was their best night for sales ever. So that was great news. Now gearing up for Small Business Saturday and then the Candyland Christmas events that the chamber puts on and the lighted Christmas parade. That's, I think, all I have.
Great. And for my staff report, just a few updates for you all. Construction's been finalized at Domino's. They're open, making delicious pizza. I had it for lunch the other day. Highly recommend. The dental office on the other end of the strip mall is currently under construction. Burger King is really close to completion. I just checked about 30 minutes ago. We still don't have a date. They're still saying soon, so it will happen soon. The medical marijuana facility is still under construction. They're currently doing concrete and they're hoping to have steel on site by mid-December to start the building. Diamond Creek subdivision is still under construction. And Eagle Ridge subdivision is doing cement at the moment and subbase. All right, that's all I have for staff.
Now I guess we want to open up some discussions regarding the TIF recommendations. Megan, were you going to bring up anything? No, no,
Yes,
that's fine.
She's
That's fine.
definitely here for a resource if you have any
Yeah,
questions.
no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't skip over anything if you needed to. So I think we just have the kind of bullet points that you sent out, Anna, regarding some specifics of what we need to come up with.
Yes, so last month we were able to go over TIF incentives. Thank you, Megan, on the presentation and education. What we've done is, since we've gone through all of that information, what we want to do now is actually talk about the parameters of the incentive, what you want to recommend to our board to include in the incentive toolbox that we will be providing to developers. So in your packet, I've provided samples, examples of what the items that you can change, that you can move around. That's not to say that you have to for any single one of these items, but what we are looking for are recommendations on these items if you view them to be important to have. So going through the list, so the first one suggestion is have a % reimbursable project cost cap. Or outside public improvements are always required, or they're encouraged. Thank you. City approval of tenants, that thing. So if we want to go around the room, Carrick, I won't put you on the spot for this one. Next time I will though. But if we want to go around the room and talk about certain things that you all would like to see in the toolbox regarding specifically TIF. At our next meeting, we'll go over chapter 100 and 353, but right now our conversation should be surrounding TIF. Who would like to start?
Kelly, I think she wanted to.
Yes, Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, I don't, just to start throwing out what we would like to see, right?
Yes.
As the recommendations. Okay, I would like to see no single family housing. Let's see. I would like it to be sales generating businesses. I do agree that they should do public improvements, outside public improvements. And my recommendation is a 15-year cap. Trying to go down my list, sorry. I think that's all I have for right now. I have
Great,
so many notes.
Thank you, Kelly.
Great, thank you. Bruce, would you like to go next? All right. Anyone volunteering to go next?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I definitely agree with Kelly on no single family. And I also would like to see the 15-year cap. As far as outside public improvements that are required to be included in the project, I guess would that mean things like sidewalks or parking, you know, what, okay.
Parking lots, or maybe a adjacent pocket park, or improvements to the area. Anything that would be usable by the public.
Right. I definitely would encourage, you know, if it's something like a complex or anything that's going to need park, I would definitely say that they have to have a certain parking capacity that is added that could also be usable for the public.
So in addition to their required parking, either make it a public parking lot or.
Yes, either
Okay.
make it public or something additional for, you know, they have visitors that come to an apartment complex or
Mhm.
whatever, just they can add to.
Yep, notice.
So I'll jump. So at least for Smithville Commons,
Mhm.
they had a CID which funded a lot of this, but like their public improvement was that intersection, right? They did all the surrounding infrastructure for that intersection and did all the lights and stuff. That the
Gotcha.
CID and the TIF paid for those public improvements. So that's an example of something that, you know, could be required that they, if it's going to be heavier traffic, you know, they should put in the
Mhm.
corresponding infrastructure.
Yes. then I would definitely say that needs to be strongly encouraged, if not required.
Okay.
City approval of tenants, what is that? That just means the
Just a
businesses that go
suggestion.
in is like, just that we could say that the city would need to approve any new businesses that are coming, like if strip mall goes in or.
Right. So it's similar to what Kelly was saying about sales generating.
Mhm.
So we want a store or that's retail or anything like that, not necessarily offices.
Gotcha.
So having a sales generating business is a type of that approval of tenants, not necessarily a bank or something like that. But we could get down to the detail of requiring each individual tenant
Mhm.
if the city wanted to be that involved.
There's two ways to look at it. There's two ways you can do it. So way we've done it at Smithville Commons is the city, they have to, if they want to put a business in, they have to have written approval by the city.
Mhm.
However, I have seen it in cities where, I mean, there is a list attached to the back of a TIF plan that says it can only be a department store or a fast food restaurant or I mean, like it's a list and they cannot defer from that list.
Mhm.
So it could look like either of those things.
I definitely think that would be a great idea. I think that's all I have specifically for now, unless I think of something else.
Okay. Oh, Kelly?
And I was also, I'm thinking it must be at least like a $750,000 project or $1 million project. Something on the grand scale.
Of total project cost, not necessarily the percentage of,
Right.
okay. Is that something that we can do?
Yeah, I mean, you can encourage that they be. You can encourage that they can be a certain, it has to be a large scale development, but I would recommend a percentage of reimbursable project cost cap. You would want to probably also tailor that to only being, I think from the majority of the cities in the metro area, they do between a 15 and 20% cap on reimbursable project costs for, 20% of the total project costs are the only things that can be.
What do you all think of that as far as the percentage of total reimbursable costs? So the amount that the developer could get back. Kelly,
I did have 20% project costs
20?
written down as well.
Okay. %20 max.
I agree. I think that's fair.
All right. Jason? Get it a little bit closer to you.
There we go. All right, I can't get it. Come on. I agree with everything that we're talking about, 20% max back. Am I right in a TIF financing can't include single family residents anyway?
Yeah, we would never recommend.
Okay, yeah. I knew there are better uses for other things than TIF. I just want to make sure that we're not redundant on that. On the 15-year cap, I think we better maybe be a little bit more flexible with that to tie in with financing, maybe how long, I mean, projects that you're seeing now, are you seeing them around the 15-year? Are you seeing more 20 or what are you looking at?
It really depends. When we're drafting these, we put usually the ones that we're doing, we put a cap on what your total reimbursable project cost can be. But however, interest isn't included in that. So these, when they're submitting their cost certifications, they're also generating interest. So a lot of times, if we were just pure cap, then yeah, we could probably get it paid off in a shorter amount of time. But because we're starting to add interest in on that, sometimes they go a little bit longer. I've seen TIFs end early. I have one that we're working on that was just a straight $1 million. That was it. That's what they were going to repay. So that one will probably end around the 15-year mark, maybe a little bit earlier, but a lot we see go the full 23 years. But I think the tighter your percentage cap on your reimbursable project costs, the easier it is to adhere to those shorter timelines.
I don't want to see us, box ourselves in saying 15 years max on something that we could easily see 20 to 25 or 23, like you're saying. So I guess I'm being kind of fluent with that. I just don't want to see ourselves down. And then improvements, yeah, that I always like to see improvements with bigger projects, especially something outside of the project specific. On the city approval of tenants, I love the idea of maybe a broad stroke on that. But I think the city getting into the granulars of what tenants can be inside of that project, maybe base tenants and things like that, but when you're going to smaller, sites, phases, or whatever you're gonna do, construction sites, the city getting too involved, I think may shy some builders away from here, or some project managers away from here, because maybe you're digging a little bit too deep in. So I have a level of concern with that as well.
Okay, it's a good thought.
And as far as the years with the 15, we can always say prefer 15, are always open to other proposals for further negotiations or conversations. So it's not a hard 15, it's we prefer this, but we're open to conversation.
Just wanted to ask, with that, we're making our recommendations, and this is my second meeting I'm in, so with us making the recommendations, we don't have to have exact bullet points of how we want this to lay out. We can have the let's say, parameters drawn out, and then they can kind of float within or be more project specific when bigger projects
Absolutely.
are coming. Okay.
Yes, yep. So we're forming a policy, and so the policy we have right now is more of a toolbox that says these are the incentives that we have that are available to developers. What we're doing now is this policy that these are the things that either we prefer or we're going to recommend or require. So in some situations, I'm sure that some things will float around to and change based on negotiations. So yeah. Nothing will change more than the state statute, but other than that, I think we're pretty open to negotiation. Callie?
I also agree that we should cap it like around like $1 million or so. And
Cap the
That-
total project cost or minimum? So have a minimum $1 million or above for TIF projects.
yes.
Okay,
Yes, correct. And I also agree that it should be a sales generating. I would love to see something that, like families could do, whether it be like a bowling alley or like a roller skating rink or something that would generate, more families coming, and I don't know. doing
Activity
birthday
type.
parties and
Mhm.
yeah, stuff like that. So, so I don't know how we would write that out, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Megan, have you had anything come up like that in anything prior as far as Callie's suggestion of the family oriented?
No, we see a lot of requiring them to be sales generating businesses, that just because whenever you're doing a TIF, I think everybody prefers that they're eats driven, which the sales tax side, they pay off a little bit faster, and it's a better incentive for the developer to get things done because they get paid back a lot faster if there are high sales tax generating businesses. Yeah, I've not seen one, a lot of obviously public improvement requirements, but I haven't seen one that would require family friendly, but I mean, it's not a bad idea, it's just something that you could suggest. That's not a bad idea. I just haven't seen it.
Right.
I think that may depend on the developer as well.
Right.
Attracting, just like trying to attract a hotel to the area, trying to attract a developer who does those kinds of things like a main event or I want to say Kokomo's, but
You're
that's
right.
Michigan,
Power
but
play or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Does anyone have anything else they want to add or change?
So I'll give you a summary of what I've got so far.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've got a 20% reimbursable project cost cap. Public improvements are highly encouraged. As far as city approval of tenants, we're around, so from a broad stroke to a industry type, is that kind of a label for it?
Yeah.
not necessarily not detailed businesses, but we want a grocery store here. We want a retail store here. We're open to these types of businesses rather than naming of the businesses.
Yes.
Real quick, and this is just based on planning and zoning and things like that for the city. Are there any stipulations of what can be within a certain, distance from another? So you don't end up with two used car
Compete?
dealerships beside each other, or things like that, so that it pushes some of that out a little bit. You don't end up with, a mom and pop grocery store right next to your
Price
superstore,
Chopper.
your Price Chopper.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Is that on the Smithville side? Does the city have that drawn out?
I'll have to look.
specific?
Yeah, I'll have to look into if it's in the code. Yeah, what's in the zone, we can look that up.
We can look it up.
Okay.
Yeah, we can look that up.
It's a good idea.
That's a really good thought.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's also ways to,
Non-compete.
yeah, and also just like not allowing like businesses to relocate within, other than with prior city approval. Like, how obviously the Price Chopper moved into this one, but stopping, that from happening, that's also something that's a possible.
And I do know some of the other TIF projects that I'm aware of and things like that. Inside of them, you'll have this fast food restaurant, not naming any, but you can't have any of that sort.
Mm.
So if you've got a, let's say, burger fast food restaurant like a McDonald's, you can't put a Burger King right next door to them. You just can't have it in the project, or it's a certain number of years before you get to the ability to have both of them inside the same project.
We'll definitely take a look at it and see if that's something that we could take a look at. And that might be something that would be business specific too,
Mhm.
just a private business practice.
Kind of along those lines too. I mean, just as a whole, I'm going to pick on like payday loan people, but as a city, can you say like, we only will approve 2 of those within city limits? Or, does that get too nitpicky?
That's more of a zoning thing, I
Zoning.
think. But that goes into what Anna's been talking about with city approval of tenants, right? Those are the types of things you can put in there. Yeah, we're not going to allow
Yes.
any in this development. There's gonna be no payday loan things,
Gotcha.
just for an example, in this development. And usually, going to your point, I've seen, at least with the developers that I work quite a bit with, when they're planning out these larger scale retail developments, they don't like to put a lot of the same. They like to have a good diverse amount of things in there. So that's not as big of a problem as putting in your businesses that don't maybe necessarily generate the types of
Revenue that you would
revenues you're
like.
looking for. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that could be mitigated by the sales tax based.
Yes. Gotcha.
That's the reason, it's the first run of the project developing and everything like that is great. That's why I want to check city code planning and zoning, just because once you have a couple of tenants move out, or we have a downturn in the economy, now all of a sudden you have people flocking to those spaces again, and we ended up with, a Title Max and a, I don't know, car, whatever, lending.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't think of any right now. I
Gotcha.
apologize, but that's just, I know that's more planning and zoning than the TIF project itself, but I think that's good to look into.
Yeah, and I can forward that to our development director as well to
Okay.
see if he has a solid answer for you on that one.
Excellent,
So-
thank you.
All right, going back down my list, no single family housing, which we wouldn't use for a TIF anyway, so good to confirm that one. Sales generating businesses, 15-year cap, additional parking or available parking, and then a minimum total project cost of $1 million.
Mhm.
All right,
I don't have anything else.
great. So to confirm that, we do have this on the action agenda, so we can
Call a vote.
vote on those.
Okay. We vote on them as a whole. Just vote on
Yes,
the
yep,
entire
yep.
list of.
Yeah, you can say
Okay.
per what I just listed out. You don't have to list out or say specifically exactly what I just said. I can go back and put it in the minutes.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's take a motion for the approval of the TIF recommendations to the Board of Aldermen per the list that Anna just read.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Sure. Let me
This one's significantly shorter, guys.
Okay,
significantly.
thank you.
This is not nearly, these aren't nearly as complicated or. It's that one, yeah. All right, so today we're going to talk about chapter 100 and chapter 353 tax abatement. All right, you can go to the first slide. All right, so chapter 100 tax abatement. So this is kind of like an overview of how the process kind of goes. So the developer would approach the city with a proposal. A chapter 100 plan and cost benefit analysis would be created. It is required by statute to be sent to all the taxing jurisdictions. That chapter 100 plan and cost benefit analysis is usually drafted by us, can be drafted by the developer, but we tend to do those things. Just a control, a control thing. Then you would negotiate the bond documents and the development performance agreement. And then the city holds a public hearing and passes an ordinance approving the chapter 100 plan and authorizing the issuance of bonds. So with chapter 100, it is an issuance of bonds by the city. They are, for lack of a better word, fake bonds. They're not backed by the city at all. The lease payments are equal to the debt service payments on the bond. So what the developer pays out and what we have set out in their lease is equal to what they're paying. So it just kind of crosses out. Nothing is ever, the city's credit is never on the line with chapter 100. However, the city does hold title to the property during this process. So as long as the chapter 100 is happening, the city holds title to that property. That's what makes the whole thing work. All right, next slide. And if I'm going too fast, just stop me. Okay, so how does it work? So land is owned by the company. They transfer it to the city. Because it's owned by the city, they're taking advantage of the city's tax exempt status, and so it is removed from the tax rolls. Revenue bonds are issued in an amount equal to the total value of the project. So whatever the project costs that they are spending on that project, that's what they set the bond amount to be. The city then leases the land and the project back to the company. And the city and the company agree to a schedule of payments in lieu of taxes, so pilot payments similar to TIF, to set the abatement level. So occasionally in these things, the company will have some outstanding financing already involved in this project. So we do get the lender involved. You will have to explain why the city owns title. They get a little weird about it, but usually with at least the bankers in this area are kind of used to this. A lot of chapter 100s are done in the metro area. It happens very frequently. So we usually get them involved and let them know what's happening and then get them comfortable with it. Also, if there's any environmental problems that come up, any concerns, then, we can require the company to do environmental work as well. So is there any questions just about how this process, how this works? And this is all done, obviously, there's a deed involved, and then it's all done by lease and lease back documents, essentially. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So in order to do chapter 100, there are very specific projects that you can do. They can only be issued to finance the costs of warehouses, distribution facilities, research and development facilities, office industries, agricultural processing industries, service facilities, which provide interstate commerce, industrial plants, and commercial facilities. So chapter 100 itself and Missouri statutes provides the authorization for the first 7. The Constitution provides the authority to build commercial facilities. The bond proceeds can be used to finance the land, the buildings, the fixtures, the machineries inside. So as you can see, a lot of these are obviously geared towards industrial areas, but we have seen them, and I'll talk about this later. We have done chapter 100. I've done a lot of research on this actually for apartment buildings. That's possible. They are considered a commercial facility. like I said, a lot of research was done, but it does work under the Constitution. So yeah, and we'll talk about some examples. So if you want to go to the next one. So under Chapter 100, you can provide 4 different types of abatement. There is real property tax abatement to 0 to 100%. Personal property tax abatement, again, 0 to 100%. A sales tax exemption on construction materials, and then sales tax exemption on equipment and machinery, but that's a DED approval process. They'd have to apply with DED. Oh, the Missouri Department of Economic Development. All right, well, and we're going to go through each of these next. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about property tax exemption. All right, so all property of any political subdivision is exempt from taxation. So in a Chapter 100 financing, the city holds fee title to the project, leases it back to the company, so they benefit from that tax abatement. The property is then exempt from property taxes and the personal property taxation so long as those bonds are outstanding. So actually, let me make sure the next slide covers this. So whenever we do these documents, we will have a performance agreement. So if the city were to go in and say, we will allow 50% property tax abatement, there's going to be a performance agreement between the company and the city that provides that the company will then pay 50% of the taxes that would have been due on that property. So there is the ability to do that. You can set a percentage rate for property tax abatement for a certain amount of years, and then then those years are over, we transfer it, we deed it back to the company and it goes back on the tax rolls and you're done. But they will pay a pilot payment. And those pilot payments can be anything. It can be on a set percentage. It can get very complicated depending on the types of things that they build. I mean, you can get really nitty gritty with how you would want to do how the percentage is tied. All right, let's go to the next slide. So partial tax abatement can be offered. So like I was explaining, you could do 25, they have to pay 75% of what would be due and they get 25% tax abatement. So any iteration of that. And then the company enters into the agreement to pay pilots. All right. Does anybody have any questions about how property tax exemption works under Chapter 100? All right. So then for sales tax exemption, a company can apply to the Missouri Department of Economic Development to receive a sales tax exemption on all their personal property that they purchase. It has to be a project that qualifies under the Chapter 100 statute. So all of them except for commercial facilities. The personal property can be classified as machinery and used directly in the manufacturing process is entitled to this without prior approval. So if it's a manufacturing facility, all that equipment can be exempt and Missouri DED doesn't have to come in and give their approval. So that's a fun little quirk. Next slide. So sales tax exemption on construction materials. This one is very, very popular. The city can provide a sales tax exemption certificate to a company, and they can use that to purchase materials used in the construction of their project that are exempt from sales tax. So we see a lot of projects that only do this. It is a Chapter 100 for sales tax exemption on construction materials only. It lasts only during the construction period. So 2 to 3 years, 1 to 3 years really, and then it's gone. So, and there's usually analysis in the plan that says, okay, this is where they estimate they're going to be buying their materials. So what's going to be the economic hit to the city, to the county, to the state, if we were to provide this? A lot of times they're buying their materials from out of state. So there's not a massive impact on the city itself. But this one is very popular to just kind of provide an incentive, and it does help a little bit. Chapter 100, of course, has gotten a little bit more complicated because it requires a bond that the builders have to, or the developer has to purchase to do this. And so that makes it a little bit more expensive for them. Just in the last couple of years, that's been a rule that has changed, but this is something that we see on large projects. All right, next slide. So this is just kind of a breakdown of the industrial development bonds that are issued. So they may be issued for any commercial project, payable from the lease revenues from that project, and the city's full faith and credit is not backing the bonds. I think that's really critical that everybody understands that these are in no way obligating the city to anything. All right, next. So these are just kind of some things we've seen similar to the TIF policies, things that you could include with Chapter 100. So you can do a limit on the term of Chapter 100. Within the statute itself, there isn't a limit like TIF has a 23-year limit. However, my firm, due to a constitutional provision limiting how cities can, the amount of time cities can lease facilities, we have interpreted Chapter 100 to be limited to 25 years. And that's our interpretation. So that's what we use on when we do our projects. Limit the use of Chapter 100 to only sales tax exemption on construction materials. Limit the percentage of tax abatement. So obviously you wouldn't do 100, you could, we would do between 25 and 75%. Tie the amount of investment and job creation to the amount of tax abatement. We see a lot. In fact, Independence does this. There's like a matrix that they have in their policy. So it says if you invest $1 million and you create 10 jobs, this is the abatement that you're entitled to. And they're not tied to that, but that's what their preference is. And it'll have, $1 million, 1.5, 2 million, and then how many jobs they're creating. And so obviously the more investment, the higher job creation, the more abatement they'll provide. Also, projects should include desirable public improvements. All right, and then we can get into some examples. So here was one in Independence. This was a luxury apartment complex. It was in a, this is a approximately $37.5 million project. They provided 50% tax abatement for 14 years and did sales tax exemption on construction materials. So like I said, we've determined that apartment complexes work for Chapter 100s. We see them a lot. And then tying them in with both the tax abatement and the sales tax exemption on construction materials is also something that we see frequently. And then the next one, rehabilitation of an abandoned building. So this was a Kmart building in Independence that it was a $6.1 million project. They provided property tax abatement, provided sales tax exemption on construction materials. So during that construction, the company paid a fixed pilot equal to the taxes that were due the year before the construction. And then during years 2021 to 2030, they paid a fixed pilot on real property and improvements in an amount equal to the taxes due. In the year before construction increased in each odd year by 2%. I mean, so we can get really nitty gritty on how you can tie the abatement to it. And plus, they also paid a fixed pilot equal 20% of the taxes that would have otherwise been due. So, I mean, I don't say that to, scare anybody, but like we can really drill down to how the abatement's tied to it. And we see a lot of things in there that, if they don't create this amount of jobs and maintain this amount of jobs, it's gone. We're transferring the title back to you and you lose all of the abatement that we've provided to you. This is a very popular incentive. This is another one that my boss and I actually work on. Riverside, their industrial park that's in the flood zone. This was actually used in conjunction with TIF. They did a TIF, issued bonds, built that levee. It's now run by a levee district. But it was a floodplain that was not being developed. They built the levee, and then every single business in there has had actually sales tax exemption on construction materials. That's what they primarily do. So I believe I talked to my boss about this. He's the one that's been working on it the longest. And every business has had some form of Chapter 100, mostly the sales tax exemption on construction materials. That has been a very successful project and, taken land that would not have otherwise been developed and done very well for the city. All right, so do we have any questions about Chapter 100? Did I go too fast?
I don't think you went too fast. I thought it was great.
Okay.
I don't have any questions though.
Good. This one's a great one. Chapter 100 is a fun one to do if you can get the right project.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll switch to Chapter 353. So if we have a project that doesn't fit into the strict Chapter 100 industries, then we turn to Chapter 353 for tax abatement. It does get a little bit more complicated because the real property tax abatement is only available within a blighted area. So I won't go over the definition if you don't want me to, but the definition for blight in Chapter 353 as of this year is the same definition as it is in TIF. So you have to meet the same standard, which makes it a little bit easier for us. We don't have to, because chapter 353 used to be very different for blight purposes, but it's now uniform across the board. So an urban redevelopment corporation has to be created. Now that can be created either by the city or by the developer itself. I've seen it both ways, depending on how large the area is that they're wanting to provide tax abatement for. And then that is, it consists of a board per the statute that is not less than 3, but not more than 13 board of directors that sit on it. Once it's created, it has the power to operate a redevelopment project pursuant to a city-approved plan. And we'll get into this. Actually, no, we can talk about it now. I've seen it done where it's just a company that wants to build a senior living facility. And so the company creates an urban redevelopment corporation. They do a plan for that single senior living facility, and then that's it. But I've also seen them done, like the city of Lebanon recently did a citywide, not citywide, it was a certain area, a certain amount of acreage, but it was a neighborhood redevelopment corporation. And so what they do is the city created it. They have city people that sit on the board, and people that want to build houses in this area can apply for property tax abatement under chapter 353. It's a little bit more involved because it's obviously not just a single project. It's quite a few. I mean, this one's a subdivision itself. And so they apply, and there's a matrix that they work on there as to like how much you're investing and then how much tax abatement you can receive. So, I mean, it can go two ways, I guess, is what I want to. Blue Springs also does this in their downtown area. They have a large chapter 353 over their downtown, and businesses that are coming in can apply for property tax abatement under 353, depending on what their investment is. So we can go to the next one. So under chapter 353, this one's kind of a doozy. Tax abatement can be provided for up to 25 years. For the first 10 years, up to 100% of the incremental increase in real property taxes on the land, and up to 100% of the real property taxes on all the improvements can be abated. So the owner will continue to pay the base. It's kind of similar to Tiff. The owner will continue to pay the base on the land in the year before the redevelopment corporation takes title, and I'll explain why that has to happen in a couple slides. And then the owner will pay a pilot for the first 10 years. Essentially, it's so that it works out to be a pilot payment. And then for the next 15 years, it's between 50 and 100% of both the property taxes on the land and improvements. And we're not tied to that, obviously, because to make it even more complicated, you can kind of do really whatever you want in there. And then also within chapter 353, ambulances and fire districts are able to be reimbursed, similar to TIF, for 50 to 100%, whatever essentially they decide in there, what they want to get back. All right, next slide. So here's kind of how it happens. So again, the developer will approach the city with a proposal. Somebody's forming that redevelopment corporation. There's a plan that's drafted similar to a TIF plan. You have to hold a public hearing. The city will enact an ordinance approving the plan, providing for the tax abatement, making that blight finding that's required. The developer then transfers the title to the redevelopment corporation to trigger the abatement, and then it's usually immediately transferred back to the developer. So they just have to hold it for an instance to trigger that tax abatement, and then it goes back. So the development plan can either be drafted by the city or it can be drafted by the developer. It just kind of depends. Chapter 353 does give the city statutory authority to acquire property through eminent domain. And then they can then sell that property. Obviously, if the city wants to do that, it's all a city. It's not a fun process, but they do have the ability to do it, and it has been done before. It's not necessarily fun. But yeah, this one, like I said, so then that's actually it for chapter 353, because it's such a broad stroke to how you can apply it. It's really just, we offer this. And if the city, it more gets into if the city is interested in forming their own redevelopment corporation for something, then we can start talking about, okay, here's why we're forming a redevelopment corporation. Here's the matrix that we want to see, the investment we want to see, the job creation that we want to see. and then tie it to that, where then people can come in, apply for that abatement. The redevelopment corporation would approve it. And then they would go through that process as opposed to just a single developer coming in and saying, we want to use this on a property. So it's a city question.
Can you tell us the difference between this and TIF?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So that's a good question.
There are some similarities.
There are some similarities.
So what's the difference?
Oh my gosh, that's a really, really good question. No, it's fine. Well, chapter 100 is obviously, it's limited to property tax abatement, whereas in TIF, the taxes are still being paid. It's just funneled through a different process, right? Both have blight findings. That's a great question. That's a really good question. It is. I've not really ever thought about it before because everybody always comes in with a very distinct mindset as to what they want to use.
What would make a developer pick a chapter 353 incentive over a TIF? Is it just size of project?
It can be, no, not necessarily. I mean, it could be tied to that. I mean, with TIF, I mean, the developer is getting paid back for the project, the cost that they're injecting into that area, right? I mean, they know that they're going to get paid back for this certain amount of stuff. Whereas with this, they're really just getting property tax abatement. So I want to hesitate to say it's not as lucrative. That's not a good way to put it. I feel like a lot of people that come in and want to do chapter 353s, it is a smaller scale project, or it's a city that wants to rehabilitate a neighborhood and encourage growth of, building of new houses, or a downtown that is already an existing downtown that just wants to have attract businesses to come in and rehabilitate businesses, rather than with TIF, which generally is like ground up construction, right? New retail facilities. Yeah, it really is just a case by case basis. That's such a good question. I'm going to write that down so I have the answer to that better next time. That was a great question.
I just got one question on both of them, the chapter 100 and 353. These are transferable. Is that correct? That they transfer to the new, you have building.
Yes, sorry, I didn't get your question for a second. Yes. So actually, I just ran into this, the one that we did in Lebanon, the assessor, we had a very long conversation about how the property tax abatement was transferable to the new owners. So the people that bought the house, the developers built the home, and then sold it, and then they got the 353 property tax abatement to encourage, new homeowners to buy it. It's complicated. It's not complicated. It's just a form that they fill out at the end, but it's not fun for the assessor. She was not happy with me.
Well, and I think that's one way that 353 or what the 353 is different than the TIF is the fact that this can be used on homes.
That's exactly. Yes. We can use this for, yeah. And you would never want to use a TIF on residences. But surprisingly, I see these a lot for, like I said, senior living facilities. Some like the Lebanon one we did for residences. I think there's one other one that does it for residences, but there's some very successful large uses of chapter 353 that they've done around the state.
Well, it's funny, you mentioned independence, and I've seen that several times in my profession.
Oh, yeah.
They're getting transferred to new building owners and such down there on the square and everything.
Yeah, when it works well, which is good.
Do we have any more questions for Megan on chapter 100 or 353? No? Okay, so what we'll do, so take this information home with you, review it. The format will look the same as what we did for TIF. At our next regular meeting, we will go through any recommendations that you all have for chapter 100 and 353 to then go as recommendations to the board for policy. I can stop sharing this now. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Megan.
We have any new business?
Any one of you have?
I
any
don't know that we
business?
do.
I just wanted to chat about our next incentive that we wanted to talk about. Do we want to do Sid? Okay, cool.
It's a fun one, my favorite.
Megan's excited. So we will go over CIDs at our next one. And when I say next one, the date is actually up to you. Our next meeting falls in the week prior to Christmas. So I don't know about all of you, but I know that I have some major wrapping to do for Christmas presents. But up to you if you want to postpone our next meeting until the fourth Tuesday in January. How does that sound, everyone?
I would suggest we put it to January 25th. I don't think we have anything extremely pressing that's going to come up between now and then.
Okay. Kelly, does that sound all right with you?
Yes, that's fine with me.
Great. All right. Anybody else have anything else?
We don't need to vote to change the meeting, do we? Just,
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
so now we just need to vote to adjourn, a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys.
That concludes our meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.